Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brew-Do mini-series, the murder mystery Whodunnit series, where you try to solve real-life brewing mysteries that have caused lost batches, sleepless nights, and sometimes years of head-scratching. For those at CBC in Philadelphia right now, I'm super jealous, I'm not going to lie. I always cost these things up, especially going to CBC. I look at the flights and the hotel. I'm a little Excel spreadsheet. And I look and go, I just can't justify it. It's just a bit too expensive. And then as the weeks roll closer, my FOMO kicks in and I'm sat here in a relatively mild UK, kicking myself for not going. It looked amazing. I hope for the people who get to go, it's great and inspiring. Look, if anyone went and heard some great talks that you think might turn into great podcasts, please do let me know. I can go out and reach out to the speakers and see if there's anything, if they want to share that conversation on a podcast as well. I'd love to. So yeah, please do let me know. Before we dive in to episode 4, a quick reminder. If this is your first time listening to the Brew-Do mini-series, you need to stop right here. Head back to episode 1 and start your journey afresh. You are about to receive quite literally a ton of spoilers that kind of ruin the whole show. So please do go back, listen to episode 1 and start your journey there. But for those loyal brew-doers, I don't know if that's a thing. I may have just made it up. Brew-doers? Brew-doers? Who knows? You're going to hear the long-awaited answer to Brett's problem from those heady wild beer days. Of all the episodes, this received the most answers. So the most amount of people reached out. And I think it's because everyone was thinking in the same way. I will say nearly all of them were identical. Could have come from the same person multiple times. It was just so much of the same. And I myself went down the exact same route when I first heard it. You know, people have emailed, text, answered through the form. Everyone said the same thing. So that does mean that either everyone, including myself, were right or no one was. And of course, in brewing and the Brew-Do mini-series, not everything is quite as it seems. So actually, no one got this right this week. Do you know what I need? I actually need one of those like American radio soundboards, you know, to make that classic like wah, wah, wah sound. Wait, actually, maybe I could find one. Okay, I'm going to pause. Hold on. Okay, I got it. Okay, let me try that again. So actually, no one got this right. Brilliant. I've always wanted to do that. So the pile of t-shirts is stacking up here. So after we hear this impossible to get solution for this problem, I've got a ton of t-shirts to give away next episode. But I do bring positive news. The next problem is something most brewers will have dealt with. I think the word diacetyl strikes fear into every brewer who's ever dry hopped a beer, and those who haven't. Diacetyl, we're all experts in it, right? So now we get to exercise that expertise, and I want to see a load of correct answers so I can get the stack of t-shirts out of my recording space and into the hands of the people who deserve it. So let's crack on with episode 4. So welcome back.
All right.
Both to the mini series, both Brett and returning Jonas is going to bring us another one of his problems later on. How have you guys been? What have you guys been up to?
Yeah, thanks.
I've been good. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So good you got 2 invites, Jonas, you know. That's a flex.
Well, I feel really
I know.
flattered.
I've got some work to do. I've got some work to do.
Yeah, so what have you guys been up to? Tell me.
I have been getting around the country, around the south of the country, so South Wales and the South UK, and
Really?
I've done a lot of kettle findings optimizations. So all the new malt has come into the UK, been harvested and is out there now, and it's just really important to help people or brewers to check and ensure that their findings are they're using them. Are they using them right? Or do they have the right dosage based on the malt?
And anyone who listened to episode 1 would exactly know that.
Oh, really?
Am I right, Jonas?
Yes, they had.
Yeah, exactly. That was the beginning, but now we're totally in the optimization trial, helping out the breweries to do the right dosage. It's a great thing. Same on my side, but I have just been coming back from Frankfurt where there was the cider world. So I'm also looking a little bit into cider, which is a really interesting topic. And there's so many things to learn about. I didn't even know different apples and different composition of the apples. It's really interesting.
I actually I was saying to someone just not that long ago, I was like, I'd be really interested to be a cider maker for 6 months. I think just probably about my max time I would spend in the cider industry. I think after a while I get.
It's important to choose the correct 6 months though, because 6 months of the year is not that much going on.
Yes, yeah. Like, hey guys, I'm ready to work. It's like, yeah, there's nothing to do, man.
It's really rainy outside. We're gonna prune some trees.
To be fair, actually, I wouldn't like to do it in that weather, but it does sound pretty fun to be outside and pruning trees.
Yeah.
But yeah, learning about the different, I feel it's not a million miles away from wine, really, is it? To be honest, just not got quite the same glamour to it, but yeah, similar probably.
It gets
and
really.
then a cider fest in Frankfurt.
Yes, it's the biggest in Europe, actually.
You're kidding.
The one.
Surely there's one in Somerset. There has to be one.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a few in the UK. Yeah, but looking at Europe mainland, it's the biggest, and there's a big apple cider region around Frankfurt, which is historically the cider region of Germany.
That's right. I went to Frankfurt last year, and I had some amazing cider there. It's just dawning on me. You're just reminding me that, and you're saying that, and it's making me. Yeah, I mean, it tasted on par. What I would say on par with Somerset cider. It's lovely, really good. Really good. There is a cider con here in this country, which I did in March.
Cider con.
Oh,
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. There are 4,000 different varieties of apples. It's crazy. It's nuts. It is nuts. But the cider fermentation and clarification and how it's finished it's incredible. It really is, going through different malolactic fermentations or all the nutrients, like the yeast available nitrogen that's in the apple itself versus wanting to add in nutrients as well, or it's just a whole nother thing. It's pretty neat, really neat.
Well, you know what, Brett, if I ever do a spin-off of the Modern Brewer podcast, it's a Modern Cider Maker podcast, I know who I'm going to be getting on as my first 2 guests. It's these 2 guys, eh?
I'm working hard.
So, Brett, once again, people are here. They only want one thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to know about cider. They want to know what happened at Wild Beer.
Yeah.
Why are those beers?
Why?
Turning out so oxidized in the bar. Tell me.
Yeah. So
what's going on here?
So one day, it was a Friday, I got a call. Brett, take a look at your WhatsApp. Have a look at these pictures. Is the pale ale supposed to look like this? And they showed it, and it was dark brown. And I was so frustrated in that moment. I was like, it's almost like they're pushing this beer out with hyper amounts of oxygen, like pure oxygen. And it dawned on me, why don't I take my Orbisphere and go check the purity of the CO2? So I went and got the Orbisphere at the brewery. I'd never actually done this check before. So I was like, I don't know what good CO2 measures on my Orbisphere. Is it 0 or what? Right? So I don't know what number is it going to say. So I hooked it up to our ring main already that we had at the brewery. and I can't remember what number it was, but 28 or something, and then drove 45 minutes to the bar and took apart the cellar a little bit to get to the right CO2 line, and sure enough, it maxed out. It very quickly reached up above parts per billion, then went into parts per million, and went like well over 10 parts per million. It was, I was just speechless for a while and like angry. And so I instantly called around to a few other bars that we are friends with and got some CO2 and brought it over and I checked their CO2 to see what theirs was, and then brought it over, and they let us borrow some, and the problem went away. And we also found a new gas supplier.
Wow.
So what this was is we bought it from a national gas supplier, but that supplier used small company like depots, independent company depots that would distribute the bar gas around, because there's so many little tiny drops. The big company didn't drop to small little venues. They used the local guys to do that, and the local guys were they were topping up like partially emptied CO2 canisters with compressed air, or they were just putting compressed air in CO2 canisters and then giving them back to make money.
Same thing.
Oh, that is
Yeah. And
that's soul destroying. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is,
Yeah.
what's really difficult about that is if you are buying from a national gas supplier, I mean, how are you supposed to know the supply chain logistics of that company? You just see big company and you think reliable gas.
Well,
I'm very convinced that the stuff leaving their facility is within every specification you can imagine, within some small occasional deviation or whatever. But for people to be topping up CO2, and that's probably why it wasn't like,
it was sporadic.
Sometimes it was super, super intense. Sometimes it wasn't so much, but it was so sporadic because you just didn't know what was really going on.
Yeah. And it was also, it generally flared up when we were slower. So we tried to fix everything right before the busy season, and we did that. We changed all the gas lines. If you remember, I told you, and then the busy season happened and we thought we solved it. And that part of it was intermittent, bad gas, but also the beer was flowing faster, right? So they were getting emptied faster. So if there was any oxygen present, it was just a day or two, right? And the keg was empty. And you can also see that on the particular lines. I told you which number lines they were. Those were the lines that were the specials or the sour beers, right? The stronger IPAs or the one-off specials or the sour beers. And because they generally lasted a bit longer, because they would sit amongst the oxygen faster, where the other lines, they were the pintable beers that people were going for 4 pints of it rather than a wine glass size. So it had nothing to do with equipment and everything to do with the rate of sale and, well, everything to do with the oxygen. But
I think that's what got me when you were describing the problem, was the busy season was the key part, right? Because you fixed you changed the cellar and you're like, majority of this is fixed because you did it just before the busy season, and then the busy season just allowed the flow. And even if and also that gas was only coming in every now and then. So it's a tough thing. I mean, I don't know. It's also quite a good reminder for everyone that not just to trust what's coming in. It doesn't matter if it's a reputable person. There might be some things that have happened in between. I mean, I can tell you safely right now, I've not gone around and measured every delivery of CO2 we've ever received into the brewery. I can tell you safely, I might have measured one in my entire life and gone, yeah, that's all right. Out of curiosity, I never done it. It's a really good reminder to not just trust everything. I think as a brewer, that's why we always, some of the stuff you come in, it's like, it's fine. It's always going to be fine. It's gas.
Yeah.
How can it be to mess that up?
You shouldn't have to check it all.
I mean, you shouldn't. So right.
You have to.
Right.
I mean, the company was. I'm almost certain the company was like, ISO standards, right? ISO 9001. Because this is a company that supplies to hospitals and all types of companies. So I'm not sure. Yeah. But since then, it wasn't uncommon for us to just check the CO2 lines at the brewery now at that point, because we were like, well, we know what it should be. And also we shouldn't trust maybe our pipework has some leaks and it's like creating like a little venturi and sucking in some air. You know, because there's push fit fittings, there's Jubilee clips, there's, you know, all these types of things can wear out over time, let alone just not be put on properly. So basically don't trust anybody and don't trust any of your equipment.
But have you ever heard of anything like this with a gas supplier
Not really.
putting compressed air?
Not really. I also
CO2.
never measured any gas. I think I measured one time a nitrogen gas bottle because it was used for pushing out beer to be measured in a CO2 and oxygen meter. That was important, but I never heard of bigger breweries or any breweries doing it. But it only makes sense, you know, you're having all the parameters of every raw ingredient that you're using, but then you're blindsidingly using any gas that's delivered to you. So it totally makes sense.
But this is the other thing as well. It's not even your place.
Well, I know
right?
breweries are taking the gas and using filters or making microbiological tests, but not really checking what's the quality of it, the purity.
There was a podcast just as you were talking, Jonas. I actually remembered a podcast of someone talking about CO2 being delivered and having a contamination from the hoses that the delivery person used. So the CO2 as like liquid CO2 is like such a good solvent, and especially if it starts evaporating or vaporizing, it can be such a good solvent that it was actually taking like hydrocarbons out of the rubber from the hose, and so it was at the bottom of the CO2 tank. But this was a story from, you know, global brewer who had loads and loads of road tankers coming in of CO2. But it was an interesting one, just thinking of, as Jonas was saying, like you think it's all good and it's all professional, it's all safety, everything's put together, there's the ISO standards that happen and everything, and you just don't question it. But then, oops.
Yeah. And also, I will say and I think this has happened in a previous podcast. Another to take away is listen to your customers. You are so right. It's so easy to be like, bars just gotta, you know, they don't know what they're doing. And actually, like, it was a big investigation, a big expense, big time. But listening to that feedback and not feeling like you know better or you can assume their situation is not what they say is really important, because, you know, that could have happened for a long, long, long time. And no one ever thinks that's the bar's fault. It's always the brewery.
Yeah.
It's a bad beer.
Yeah.
It's never a bad pour, you know?
And you put so much effort into like the raw materials and the recipe, into making it, let alone the farmer who put so much effort into growing all the grain and the hops and everything. And it gets destroyed with a bad CO2. So don't take it for granted. Listen to the customers. That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And maybe that's a lovely point for us to part ways. I think it's been a fantastic problem to share. Thank you so much. Outside the brewery as well, which is always good. Yep. We live so much in our brewery, but our beer is still drank outside. So it's always a good place. You know, you always get called in, and that point of sale is as important as the BDT.
That's
it. Go out and test it as much. Not always. So yeah, a really good stark reminder that problems happen outside the brewery as well.
Yeah, the job's not done by making the beer. Like, the goal is to get someone to enjoy it. That's it. You've got to drink it and enjoy it and tell someone else and buy another one. Those are the 3 goals.
And with that, whoosh. Yeah.
Adios.
See ya, Brett.
See you guys.
That was a good problem, eh?
Yeah, that was a good one. I was really happy to hear that, because, you know, there's so many different aspects of raw materials and processing that's going into the beer. We'll never learn everything in our life. So it's keeping us busy and interested.
Yeah. My friend Fergus said, he's like, brewing is like whack-a-mole. You hit one problem and 2 more pop up. Hit one problem, 3 more pop up. It's a never-ending game, eh? And on that note, we are going to have a really good one from yourself coming shortly. But before that, I've had a lot of people since our first episode message me about German purity law, Super F, etc. So it would be great to hear how that managed to get in, because I think that's quite a big question for people. People assume, myself included sometimes, it's just malt, yeast, water, hops line underneath it. But I think you were saying it's something slightly different.
Yeah, the German purity law is an interesting thing that it's still existing, and it's now more than 500 years old. Actually, it's the 510th anniversary this year. And it is still existing, but there's a new version, which is actually the beer law in Germany, which is from 1992. And there is also stated which other products you can use. It's just important that they're not in the final beer. But it's not really measured. Like, you're allowed to use PVPP for filtration, for example. So some of the PVPP could come through into the beer, but this is allowed. So therefore, we're a little bit also fighting that we can use carrageenan product, like our Brotaflock, because these polysaccharides that are binding to the proteins to make the wort more clear, they are falling out right away, and they will not be in the final beer. And this is a total natural solution, a total natural product from seaweed. And the PVPP is a plastic. So in the end, we are looking that we also get our natural product into the German beer market, that it's allowed to use it. But the Super F, which is a silica, it's allowed in the beer law in Germany since 1992.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I genuinely didn't know that. Probably part ignorance, but yeah, that's really interesting to know. I know a few people as well were like, it's crazy trying to sell this in Germany. Not crazy, but like hard. It's a hard sell, but it's not the only thing that you're doing there. I know that you also have a lot of amazing technologies that apply to every brewery in the world, right?
Of course. And this is something that we always talk about when we go around to breweries. Like in the UK, we have really great technical sales managers. I'm for now alone in Europe, so I'm going to less breweries, but I'm going to conferences and I'm talking to the brewers. And what is also a hot topic on their mind in the last years, especially when it was this heavy year during COVID, when the CO2 prices were rising like crazy. So there are a lot of brewers said, where can I get reliable CO2 source, and where can I get good pricing? So in this kind of thinking, we're also cooperating now with a company that makes nitrogen generators, because we actually made the calculation with them. And if you look at a small brewery that says we're buying this and this amount of CO2 bottles per year, then usually if they invest in a nitrogen generator, their return of investment is in the first year. And what is the good thing? And this is the same thing that we always talk with the products of Murphy & Son. We want to make process more easy, give a better quality, but we want to have a more economical and ecological production. So if we have our own nitrogen generator, then it's way more ecological. Our CO2 carbon footprint will be way less. And this is all going into our CO2 footprint in the end when we make the equation. So this is a really hot topic for us. And as the return of investment is so low, it's kind of a non-brainer for breweries that use a lot of CO2.
Yeah, I've done multiple episodes on the Modern Brewer podcast around nitrogen, how to use it, specifications, the different technologies available. I'm a huge believer in it. I think it's a really good tool for brewers to reduce carbon footprint, as you said, but also just cost of goods sold. It's a lot cheaper to generate nitrogen than it is to use CO2. There's always a bit of it's a lighter gas.
Yeah.
You know, that's always the thing I hear. I'm not, that's what I always hear is a major barrier, but it's, as the podcast I did, it goes over, it's simply an easier, just a few switches to your usual routine, if it's even that.
Exactly.
But it's really good as well.
Exactly. And there we're talking again about gases. We just had a talk with Brett about gas, where there was a big problem. So obviously when we generate nitrogen, then we also are going to have like a measurement afterwards to assure that it's high purity. And from there on, you can also get CO2 and oxygen measurement devices from us. We also help you with trialing them out. We help you with maintenance of them. So this is really important to always check throughout your brewing process, CO2, oxygen, what's the amount in my product or in the final product beer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we heard, it can be an essential tool to catch some pretty rogue behavior from rogue people doing things. That's mental. That was. So, Jonas, you got another problem for us.
I do.
You got another one from your vast experience in the industry. And again, I asked you in the first episode, but what time period did this come from?
This was actually only like 3 years ago. So
Oh, wow.
just after COVID. Yeah, 2 years ago, just after COVID.
Amazing. Okay. So,
All right.
this one is one that's a common one. The ultimate, the D word. It's a word that every brewer knows is our good friend diacetyl. Everyone's probably had it during their career at some stages in their beer. But let's hear about this specific problem and if someone can actually solve it.
Yeah, it's a diacetyl problem, so our most popular topic. All right, I'm going to jump right into it. So we look at the brewery first again. So this brewery was producing like 45,000 hectoliters a year, so also not too small. Their focus was almost exclusively on bottom fermented lager production, so a lager beer brewery. Typically, they were running a 5 vessel, 5 hectoliter brew house, and then they had 50 and 100 hectoliter CCTs. And those CCTs, they were for the fermentation, but also for the conditioning, so a uni-tank system. The whole brew house and the cellar were automated. For clarification of the beer, they utilized the centrifuge. No filter was used, so only centrifuge right away afterwards into 50 and 100 hectoliter BBTs. And then they were filled into cans or kegs. The issue that we had, or that they had, began when the brewers that were on the floor started noticing some more concerning fermentation trends. So certain batches were taking a significantly longer time to get through the lag phase and reach final attenuation. Even more concerning on that side was that these fermentations showed massive peaks of diacetyl. There we're talking more than 0.1 milligram per liter, which they were also checking with an external laboratory. So diacetyl, as we know, the infamous buttery or toffee-like off flavor. So they noticed that the yeast in these batches was struggling to reabsorb the diacetyl during maturation, and this forced the brewery to extend the tank times by up to 2 weeks just to reach their diacetyl specification. They usually wanted to have diacetyl less than 0.05 milligrams per liter after conditioning, and this, as I said, was analyzed by an external accredited laboratory. So let's look deeper a little bit into the process of this brewery. And we start with the water. So also here, the incoming water was pre-treated with charcoal, then an RO filtration, and then adjusted with minerals. Classically, for a lager beer brewery, they had step mash system, and the pH was adjusted there with phosphoric acid. And they wanted to get the mash into a range between 5.3 to 5.5. They were using enzymes, but only one, and this was beta-glucanase for a better mash filtration, for a better lautering. This brewery used 2 German suppliers for malted barley and used no other malt for their beers. Wort clarification was done here with carrageenan, and then after the whirlpool, it was going straight to the CCT. The brewery used 2 yeast storage tanks, both of them 10 hectoliters, and they were using just 1 lager yeast for the entire brewery. So for the different lager beer styles, they would manipulate the mashing, so it had different step mashes, and would have a different fermentation profile. They never propagated yeast on the side. First pitch was always with dry yeast and with nutrients. For best-selling lagers fermentations, they were harvesting sometimes, and they would do this then into their 2 yeast storage tanks. And into the yeast storage tanks, they would maximum leave it there for 5 days, and then they repitch it maximum 3 times, and then would start again with the dry yeast. The repatching of the harvested yeast was done by volume. So one more time about diacetyl. So as I mentioned before, they had to wait a longer time during conditioning time. So usually diacetyl is produced by the yeast itself from alpha acetolactate, which leaks out of the cell and then oxidizes into diacetyl. So a healthy yeast should reabsorb the diacetyl pretty fast and then reduce it to flavorless compound, the so-called acetoin. If this does not happen fast enough, then it means there's too much diacetyl production for the beginning, and also that the yeast is not really healthy or that there's not enough yeast. So the brewery was starting to look into their fermentation and into their yeast management. So after they were inspecting the lineage of their yeast generations, they realized that this extreme diacetyl issue was coming from yeast that was pitched only from the second yeast storage tank. Then they checked the yeast going into both yeast storage tanks because they were harvesting at the same time for both storage tanks. So they were checking the yeast from the CCT, they were checking the yeast during the harvesting, and they were checking the yeast after harvesting right away in the yeast storage tank. They were doing that by taking a sample and doing cell counting and methylene blue tests with their own microscope. So to their surprise, all the 3 tests showed the same healthy, viable yeast in both tanks. Also important notice, the temperature probes, the temperature sensors on both vessels were fine. And also they were taking samples of both yeasts and plating them to make a microbiological check. Everything was okay on this side. Because when we came there, we were talking with them. And then we also tested the yeast again, taking it from the CCT. We were also testing it during harvest, and we were testing it right after the harvest. But then also we were testing it one day after the harvesting. And here we saw a really interesting thing, because there in the yeast storage tank number 2, the viability has dropped to below 85%, and the pH in yeast storage tank 2 was now at 3.8, compared to yeast storage tank number 1, where it was 0.3 higher pH. And also in yeast storage tank 1, the viability was at 95%. So we were really like thinking, what could be this issue? And we already made this test. What could we do further on from this? So I'll leave you to it to come up with a solution.
Oh, Jonas, you tease. Yeah, that is good. That is good. So for anyone listening, remember, all the information you need is always in what Jonas has just said. Feel free to listen again, listen again, listen again. Whatever it takes. There's also going to be a text file you can read if you prefer that. And if you really want to be a student, then you can go there, make notes and have a look. But yes, Jonas, thank you so much. So it just, again, leaves us with the final question. Can you, the listener, solve this issue? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't miss the answer, and you won't miss the final problem of our mini-series coming up on the next episode of the mini-series Brew-Do.